presidents of Marketing Club, and I'm here today to introduce Professor Bob Bell. He's a 1994 graduate of St. John's and has worked all over the country, including Minneapolis, Washington, D.C., and working on Wall Street, New York. Most recently, Bob is a professor here at St. John's in the Accounting and Finance Department, and he released a book in May called Unmoving Forward. Please join me today in welcoming Bob to the talk.
Thank you. So, first of all, I want to, the reason why I'm here is because Paul Marsnick and Steve Schwartz in the Global Business Department kind of pitched this out to a couple of the clubs in the Global Business Department and said, you think you can help, spread the word of this book, spread the message, help Bob, but maybe, hopefully once you read this book, how many have read it, by the way? Okay, a few. But hopefully, I really don't care if you read it or not. I can tell you from the start of the night, you don't really make money publishing a book. If it gets bought in the bookstore, my publisher gets 50% of the cost, the bookstore gets 40%, and I get 10%. And that 40% goes back to students. So, this really isn't a money maker for me, but I actually believe in the message, and I hope, you will too, when you learn a little bit more about it. But even if you don't buy the book, tonight I think, is special for me because I'm going to at least be able to go through a few of the tips. Actually, I hope to make it through. There's like 9 tips in this book. There's I say this isn't really a memoir. It tracks a fair amount of my life, but it basically tracks my time once I came here to St. Ben's and St. John's. And so, those of you that have faced challenges in your life, you already know the perspective that comes from it. And then, the reality is you're all going to face more challenges. And so, I'll go through my situation and give you a little bit of my background. But I've learned a lot, I feel like, from my own challenges. And that's what this book is about, kind of helping others not have to learn it the same way I did. And so even if we spend 30, 45 minutes together here tonight, and I give you some of the ways that I've learned to face life challenges, maybe it'll help you as you go out and you face challenges throughout your life. So, but anyway, I wouldn't be here without the Marketing Club putting this event on. There's another club, View In. They're videoing this tonight. If you haven't checked out my website, bobbellbooks.com, View In put that thing together. It's amazing. It looks like I spent $100,000 on it, and I'm sure they'll bill me for that, but I'm not going to pay them $100,000. But it looks great, and Enactus is getting on board with this. So it's one of those things that if we all get together and, spread the word about this as a community, maybe we can make a difference. And I think it represents St. Ben's and St. John's well, and hopefully it can help other people learn about the community we have here and how it's special. So, why did I write the book? Really, it started off as that I needed this book when I was first injured, and I'll get to that. But this book wasn't there for me. I had to learn a lot of this stuff myself. So at a certain point in life, it's not really that novel or that unique. If you face a difficult time in your life, you think, maybe I should write a story about this. So, not long after I was injured, I thought maybe I would write a story about this. But I knew I needed to live enough life to have enough stories to fill it. But that was my first level, thinking to myself, I want this, I needed this. Somebody that gets injured with a spinal cord injury when they're young, I want them to be able to have this book. That dream has already been realized, really unfortunately, and that people, since this book has come out, have been injured. I've been able to give this book to them. In that way, that dream has already been realized. And, because there's so many things I want to say to them, but I can't pick up the phone, call everybody, have the time with everybody. So I've been able to accomplish that. The second level of the book was really for anybody facing one of life's challenges. I'm 44 years old, so I just had my 20th reunion from St. Ben's and St. John's. So I'm basically 22 years removed from where a lot of you guys are. And a lot happens in those years. People get divorced, people get married, and then divorced. They, lose family members, depression, eating disorders, death of children. There's really nothing worse than that when one of your friends lose their children. But these are difficult things that you will face. And so in some ways, I was writing the book for some of them, letting them know what I've learned through their challenges. But the last part, and why I'm just fired up to speak with you tonight, is because when I'm getting close to the end of the book, I realized that in many ways I was writing it for Johnny's and Benny's. I knew I was going to, come back here before I came back here, and then here I am back here as a professor, and I'm writing this book. And, I have 2 nephews and a niece, but it was, I don't care about all the other college students in the world. I just care about Johnny's and Benny's. And so, but I think it could resonate with anybody young. But there's a message in the book that's a lot about being deliberate in your life about living the life you want to live. And starting at a young age. And because of my accident, I was put in a position necessitated to think about the life I wanted to live much earlier than most of you do. But having done that, I think I've lived a life that at this point I'm pretty proud of. No doubt about it, I make mistakes, I continue to make mistakes, but being deliberate about who you want to be at this stage in your life, you can wake up at a very early age and say, I'm pretty proud of where I am. So we'll get to that. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself, then we're going to chip through some of these tips, but feel free to ask any questions, to interrupt, just keep this like a conversation. And you can ask anything. If I'm not comfortable answering it, then I won't answer it. But you can ask anything. So how about this? How many know nothing about me? Everybody knows something? How many know anything good about me? So I was born and raised in Pensacola, Florida. I had never owned a real jacket or pair of gloves. I had never seen snow in my whole life. And between my junior and senior year of high school, a high school teacher's husband's friend, that connected. High school teacher's husband's friend had gone to St. John's, and this high school teacher told me about St. John's. So I drove up here with my mom. It took us 2 days, really 3 days to drive up here. 22 quarts of oil because our car was leaking oil the whole way. And now maybe you'll understand the cover of this book a little bit more. But my mom and I drove up here 3 days. Every hour she had to stop, put another quart of oil in, and my mom drove the entire way. I sat in the back seat because my mom was like this tall, and I'm 6 foot, and we had one of those bench front seats where whoever's driving or whoever has a seat, it only goes one way. So my knees were up in the dashboard, and so I decided to sit in the back of the car. But every time I got in the back of the car, I would just fall asleep. I mean, I'm talking about if we went from getting something to eat to the hotel, I would fall asleep. I interviewed at St. Thomas. Before I interviewed at St. John's, got in the back of the car, fell asleep all the way as we drove up here. It wasn't until we were driving home, and really when we talked about the trip afterwards, that I realized I was probably asphyxiating in the back seat most of the time. We were burning so much oil that I was just, literally dying back there. But anyway, we got on campus, and I saw a monk walking across right to the church. And I turned to my mom after a 3-day drive, not even out of the car, and I said, Mom, there is no way I'm going to school here. I said, I would get kicked out of this school in a second. And my mom said, Bob, we just drove for 3 days. I mean, you're going to interview. And, I interviewed. I met Karen Backus, who's now in charge of admissions, and we just hit it off. And I toured the campus with somebody from the Bahamas. And I got back in the car, and I turned to my mom, and I said, this is where I'm going to school. And it was the only place I applied to. Came here, wanted to be somebody different maybe than who I was. I got into a fair amount of trouble in high school, and I got into 10 times as much trouble that in grade school. I was arrested in front of my whole class when I was in 4th grade for burglary and vandalism. I was a full-time smoker when I was in the 3rd grade, in the 4th grade. And so my mom was used to me getting in trouble. I hardly ever studied. I got into the St. John's by the skin of my teeth. But when I came up here, no one knew me. So I thought I could be whoever I wanted to be. And I wanted to study. I wanted to get good grades. But what happens, same stuff's going on again. I was here about 2 months when Father Cletus, the Dean of Students, came to my door and said, you need to start looking for another school down south. We're going to kick you out. He wrote a letter to my mom because I'd been arrested for a fake ID. And so things weren't looking so good. They said the next thing I got caught for, that they were going to kick me out. This was the middle of October, about now, of my freshman year. And so November 21st of my freshman year, I woke up that morning and I had a court date. I went to court to try to get out of this fake ID. Maybe even then I was a junior lawyer, but I got a court-appointed attorney, maybe gave him, a favorable rendition of the facts, and got out of it. And came back to school that day, and everybody thought, this guy can get out of anything. Because as many things that I've been caught for, I'd probably gotten away with about 10 times more. And so that evening, though, I called my mom to tell her that I'd gotten out of this fake ID, and I was talking on the phone across the hall from my dorm room, and when I walked out, there was a guy standing in front of my door, and I had a sweatshirt on my shoulder, and I just threw it at him, kind of obnoxiously, kind of playfully, and said, get out of my way, you're blocking my door. And just that quickly, he spun me around, put me in a full Nelson wrestling hold. That's where they come underneath your arms and push down the back of your neck. And he broke my neck. And I hit the ground right then, paralyzed. And I knew I was paralyzed. And I talk about it in the book and what I said then. And the book's available for sale. Have a good one. But, I don't want to ruin the book for you. I will tell you that I don't die in the end. It's kind of a giveaway. But, so, that's kind of my story. I ended up coming back here, graduating, did much, much better, never got below a 3.5 GPA, went on, worked in public accounting, left there, went to law school at the University of Minnesota, left there, went to the Washington, D.C., worked at the Securities and Exchange Commission, left there, went to New York and worked on Wall Street, and then came back here. I'm in my 5th year. And really, it was my 2nd year in law school that I kind of realized that this is what I wanted to do, come back here and teach, really to do something like this, to have an opportunity just to spend a little bit of time with you tonight and maybe help you learn, from my mistakes, help you, cope with some of the difficult things you're going to cope with. And, I'm thrilled with how my life is going. And so really, this is a dream come true for me. So let's go through some of these tips because, there's 9 of them, not that many. And so this is my first time doing this as well. I've done a couple of book clubs for people, so, don't really know how this is supposed to go. Seems like it's going. How's it going? Okay. So, tip number 1. And I say most of these tips aren't really novel. Maybe things you've heard before. Maybe I'm saying them a little bit differently. I'm not going to read all of them. I'm just going to give you a gist of each of them. But there's a few at the end that I think are somewhat novel. And so, you take this book, and it's broken up into chapters in these 9 tips. And I wrote it this way because, besides one person said to me sometimes, keep your chapters short. No one really cares that much about what you have to say. So I wanted to keep it short. I wanted it to be manageable. But I also, if you don't want to know anything about me or my life story, these 9 tips, I think when you're facing a difficult time, are easy for you to spin through and just kind of look at. So the first one, you maybe get a little bit of flavor of how the book is written. It just says, it's tip number 1. Life will have challenges. Find the person who told you life is going to be fair, and then kick them in the fucking teeth. Because guess what? They lied to you. So, that's kind of how the book goes a little bit. Now, I've given talks a couple of times to prisoners, and that's an interesting, this is a little bit less hostile of a crowd. In fact, the first time I ever spoke to a prisoner, I was nervous as hell, and when those doors lock behind you and you're king, and they frisk you and they take everything down. And so I get in front of this group, and it's probably about 300 prisoners. And how many know, who the late, great Bernie Mac is? Not that many. Bernie Mac? Okay, you guys, well, tonight your assignment is you go home and you YouTube Bernie Mac Deaf Comedy Jams. This is when he was first coming up. And Bernie Mac comes out on the stage, and, Deaf Comedy Jams is a very hostile environment. And he comes out there and he looks at him right away. He's going, I'm going to tell you something right off the press. I ain't afraid of you motherfuckers. And then he goes on and keeps saying that over and over. And so that's kind of how it started with these prisoners. And they loved it, and I had great attention from them. And then afterwards, this Catholic priest comes up to me and he's like, I've never seen the prisoners so respectful, so in tune to what they're saying. I said, Father, you call them motherfuckers from the beginning. You have them in the palm of your hand. But it is, some people have been a little disappointed with my language in the book, and trust me, it was scaled back a little bit. But I did have to keep it real. I wanted to keep it entertaining. And the point of that one is what made you think you weren't going to have any challenges? When things aren't going right and you throw out there inevitably that why me? Why not you? What made you think that you were just going to sail through? That you weren't going to have any challenges? You're feeling like, woe is me, this is so difficult. But it's like, why did you think you weren't going to have any challenges? And it's just one of those things for you to anticipate them, to expect it. When you face that challenge, I don't want you to sit there and think, why is this happening? Challenges are going to happen to you. And so that's kind of tip number one. Life will have challenges, so expect it. Tip number two, it's not all about you. I do have pictures in this book too, even if you can't read. You can just look at the pictures. And so, tip number two, it's not all about you. This one is me in the hospital about a month after I'd been injured. I got injured, they took me to St. Cloud Hospital, and I spent about a week, I got surgery, things were going okay, but then one night my left lung collapsed, and I had pneumonia in my right lung. And basically almost died that night. My mom had to sign a bunch of papers. They ended up giving me 2 angiograms. It's where they stick tubes up into your heart to see if you have blood clots in your heart. You can die just from getting angiograms. I detail it in the book, which is available for sale. But what that night was like for me and how it felt to almost die. What the experience that went through for me. But so then I was on a respirator for about a month at this point in the story. I was ultimately on a respirator, a ventilator, for about 2 months. No spoiler alert, I'm not on the ventilator anymore. So, but it was December 20th, 5 days before Christmas, and I was about the lowest I had ever been. And I think twice in my life I would have qualified for clinical depression. Just seriously inconsolable. There was nothing anyone could say to me. There was no glint of life to me. I was as low as you could get. And then it had gone on like that for about 5 days, and then it's Christmas Day. Christmas, I'm 19 years old. I can't breathe without the use of a machine. My mom comes in the morning on Christmas Day. She turns on the Christmas lights in this tiny little Christmas tree in my ICU room. She puts little Christmas socks on my feet. She puts a little Santa hat on my head. and she's trying to be all upbeat and cheery, and I wasn't having any of it, I was like not smiling, not participating, and my mom just kind of stops and she looks at me, and as you'll see in the book, my mom has a very thick Southern accent. Pensacola is at the panhandle of Florida, kind of where the bullet comes out of the gun, if you want to think of it as Florida as a gun. We call it the Redneck Riviera, or we call it LA, Lower Alabama. But it's more southern than you think of, like Miami or something like that. And but my mom looks at me and she says, hey, if you want to go on, she said, if you want to go feeling sorry for yourself and being all sad, that's fine. You can go back to doing that tomorrow. But today, a lot of people have gone to a lot of trouble to make today special for you. So you're going to be cheery. You're going to smile. You're going to be upbeat, and you're going to say thank you. And it was one of those things. Here's my mother looking over my bed to her paralyzed son, who's 19 years old on a ventilator, and she's telling me, hey, it's not all about you. There's a lot of people around you that care about you, that are suffering, that are sad just like you, and they've gone to a lot of effort to make today special for you. And even at that point in my life, it was the first time I realized that this wasn't all me, And I want you to think about that too. When you're facing something difficult, and you're so self-absorbed with how it's affecting you, and the ones that love you, that are around you trying to comfort you, you know what? They need your strength too. They need you to be there for them. And so, that's what I ended by saying, even when spending Christmas on a ventilator is not all about you. And so, I think that's one that's important. As soon as you get out of looking outside of yourself and realizing there's other people that are suffering along with you, that's a good step in recovery. It's a good step in dealing with what it is you're dealing with. I got to go back to the index now. Number 3, life is short. Make the most of it. You guys know this one pretty well, and maybe the way I detail it is brilliant, of course. Maybe not. But, it really is. I've done this. I've been a peer counselor a few times to people with spinal cord injuries. And, I go into their room, they're newly injured, and one of the things I'll do with them is let them go on and say, I can't believe this happened to me. Why did this happen to me? And invariably I'll do something with them. I'll say, well, what you should do the next time you're feeling really sorry for yourself and you're asking, why me? Why did this happen to me? Instead of feeling guilty about it, instead of questioning, I shouldn't feel this way, but I do, why don't you just live into it? Why don't you just really focus on it? And I say, but the only thing is, before you begin doing that, why don't you just look at the time? See what time it is, and then allow yourself to fully live into it, to really question, why me? Why did this happen to me? Why, this isn't fair. Why me? And do that until you just feel like you've done it enough, until you're ready to stop for a little bit. And then look at the clock when you're done. And then ask yourself, what changed? Because what? Not a damn thing will have changed. Maybe why I never get asked to be a peer counselor very often. It is one of those things to realize there's nothing wrong with, everybody needs their time to heal and to think about it. But the amount of time you do spend thinking, why me? This isn't fair. It's just a waste of time. That may not help you when you're in the thick of things, but eventually you have to realize this is a waste of time. And I go on to detail, I feel like at my age, even when I was your age, I had a lot of friends that have passed away. And I think it's important, even though I was just kind of looking over this, thinking about talking with you guys. At St. John's, we've lost a few people your age just this year. And I think I carry a lot of people with me that I lost at a young age. I think about them regularly. I think about them when I'm feeling sorry for myself. And I think how much they would love to have the life I have. How much they would love to have one more day. And I have them carry me at times when I feel like, maybe I'm I'm not strong enough right now to go on, or I want to feel sorry for myself, and then I let them take over. Because, those people that we lost this semester, they would love to have the challenges you're having. And so when you think about the tragedy of their lives, it can kind of help you, cope with yours a little bit better. So, and then I think in some ways, and I get to this a little bit later, but that feeling of almost dying, and I've had a few other instances in my life, it kind of helps you keep things in perspective. I've had a few other instances when you've come pretty close to dying, you seem to appreciate life a little bit more. And I certainly don't wish that on any of you, that you have to get that close to where you embrace it a little bit more. But it's important to keep mortality on your mind. Maybe I'll take it before I ramble onto it. Why don't I take a few questions? Well, anybody have any? Just to break it up a little bit. Yes, Mariah.
What happened to the guy in the interview?
It's a good question. Usually I haven't even put that one out there because I know someone will ask it. But Mariah's very smart. She's an accounting and finance student. You should know. So yeah, it's one of those things that the guy who broke my neck lived in the dorm room right next to me. We weren't friends before I was injured. And we had wrestled around a little bit before. He was a freshman starter on the varsity football team. I was a bigger guy myself at the time, and so we were kind of the two alpha dogs on the floor. And we had wrestled around before, and he was a little crazy the way he did it. He had picked up one of my legs, and I had run backwards, and if I wouldn't have fallen on a bed, I think I would have been really hurt. So I kind of told myself, I don't want to mess around with this guy. Also, his roommate's girlfriend, maybe ex-girlfriend, and I had become friends. Maybe he was a little not happy about that. But the point is, I won't tell you exactly what I said to him in the book because I think I can't do it maybe as good as I wrote it. It's a great thing about writing a book, is that you kind of get to step back and tell the story in the best version possible, to say it exactly the way you want to say it. But I forgave him. I'll tell you that much. I forgave him, and I forgave him when it happened, but I really forgave him the next day. And I really don't know where that came from because I know a lot of you students, and I know I was as obnoxious and caustic and self-absorbed as anyone at 19 or 18 years old. And what grace or maturity came over me to forgive him, I marvel at it today, and the way that I did it and the words that I chose. But I ended up coming back to St. John's. He was still here. He graduated in 93. I graduated in 94. A lot of my friends hung around with him. We were around each other many, many times. And we never became friends, but he was always respectful of me when we were around. And you know how it is at parties. It can be loud, or you can be at the bars. And, I don't do that well in that environment. Everybody's up here. I have to project my voice. It was loud. And he would always pay me the utmost attention. If I spoke, he would always focus on me. And I saw him a few times at bars in downtown Minneapolis afterwards, and it was the same thing. So I haven't seen him in 23 years probably. This November 21st will be my 25th year anniversary. But I did hear a few years ago that one of the things he's doing with his life is he's a caregiver for a male quadriplegic, somebody with an injury just like mine. And so it is one of those things, he's had to deal with it himself. His life, I'm sure he thinks about it regularly. But he's hopefully gone on and done good things with his life, and that's, what I'm doing here tonight. Hopefully doing something decent with my life. Great question, Mariah. We can't top that one. No more questions for me. Establish goals. That's what you guys should be doing right now anyway. You're in college, your goal is to graduate, is to get good grades. But it is one of those things too, that when you're facing something difficult, what's going to get you out of bed? What's going to inspire you? And I do think right now it should be pretty straightforward in that your goal is to graduate and get good grades, and so I do it in a way that somebody I met at a hospital who was really at their wits' end, and how I tried to help them. And the question, the advice they were seeking from me was whether they were going to commit suicide or not. And it was a pretty overwhelming time for me to try to answer a question, but it became very clear for me, when you're at your absolute depths, what is it that's going to inspire you? What is it? And sometimes setting a goal, having something to look forward to, pursuing something, especially long-term goals, that sometimes can bring you out of that funk, that can help you realize, you know what, I got something to live for. I got something to work for. And certainly a job can be one of those, but it doesn't have to be a job. Traveling, I love to travel. To look forward to a trip, to plan a trip, you guys have lots of things at your age to look forward to. Spring break, how can you be upset when you're getting ready to go to Mazatlan? Don't ever go on spring break after you're out of college. That makes you a loser. These last, we're on tip number 5 in case you're getting ready to fall asleep. It's time to demonstrate your character. I think I have 2 really good ones. The other ones suck. No. 2 really good ones. It's time to demonstrate your character is one. And that one kind of begins with basically me at a grocery store in Maryland, and some woman comes up. I'm living in D.C., and some woman comes up and she starts banging on my driver's side door of my van, and she's like saying, "Where's your handicap tag? Show me your handicap tag. You can't park here without a handicap tag." And I'm like, this woman's literally just banging on the window, and I'm like, it's right there. She's like, "Where? I don't see it. You can't park here." I'm like, "It's right there." And she's like, "It's supposed to be on your rear view mirror." I'm like, "I don't have a rear view mirror." And it was like, it's right there on my dashboard. And this woman comes around, she looks at me, she kind of sees it, but then she goes to her car and just kind of doesn't leave. She backs up to wait for me to get out of my van, knowing full well that I'm going to pop out and everything's going to be fine and she's going to yell at me. Well, at the time, my lift on my van was in the back. And so I just kind of first take my time a little bit, knowing she's back there waiting. But then all of a sudden the electric doors open, the lift comes down, and I look at this woman, and although the reference none of you guys will get, but there used to be a politician named David Duke, and he was a racist, and he was a white supremacist racist. And this was a black woman in Hyattsville, Maryland, and I said, she didn't have to say anything, but the look on her face, she went paler than David Duke. And it's funny. It's really funny. But the point of the story is it was one of the realities of my situation. Now, if I didn't say anything to any of you guys today about how I was injured or anything, I can just show up. I'm in an upbeat mood, say a few things funny, and then I leave, and you guys would say, "God, what a positive guy. Has such a good attitude." And I would not have said anything about my injury. And, it's one of those things that I realize that I have an advantage that many people don't. And that is that my challenges, my struggle is so obvious. You can just see me and know that I have it difficult. And that's not true for what I call in the book silent sufferers. People with depression, people with eating disorders, people with back pain, people that are, struggling maybe with their family members. One of the coolest emails I've gotten since this book came out is a woman that I worked with at the SEC, who I worked with day in, day out, and she let me know that she was a battered wife. Her husband beat her, and she'd come to work every day and put on a face of being upbeat, and no one knew. And it's one of those things that I talk about that, I get instant credibility without doing anything. But those that have to suffer in silence, not only do they often get no credit for it, but then if they admit it, then they're subject to people judging them. They have to justify their challenges. And it's not fair. It's not fair. But I say in the book, it's time to demonstrate your character. Whether your challenge is obvious or silent, either way your challenge is there. So what are you going to do? I mean, this is your time. So a lot of you right now maybe aren't facing any challenges. You can say, I'm pretty tough. I think I can handle it. And that's easy to say when you're not facing something difficult. The challenge comes when it's tough, when you're facing it. That's when the rubber hits the road. That's when you demonstrate your character, when things are actually difficult. And so, I guess one thing I would say about, we only got 20 minutes left, so we got to get a few things that I wish I would have changed about the book already is I say in the book, though, that silent sufferers might have it worse. I actually believe that's not true. And in many respects, I think those that love you will eventually know about your challenges. And when they know that you suffered in silence, I think in many ways, that can make them love you even more. And I'll get to that in a minute, but it is one of those things. I would amend this chapter right now, just based on, an evolution in my thinking. But it's time to demonstrate your character. It is about realizing when you're facing a difficult time, that's when you get to prove whether you're strong. That's when you get to prove whether you have character, is when you're facing something difficult. Okay. Let's move along here. Number 6, there's strengths in numbers. That won't take long. You'll like this one. 101. So it starts with a little vignette here. We look into God for an answer to why me. Imagine the clouds parting, a warm, bright light shining down on you, birds chirping, a golden harp playing, and the feeling of peace. You take a deep breath and allow this wonderful feeling to settle in. Just then, however, a loud and very annoyed voice comes booming down from the heavens. The answer to your question has arrived. His response to you is simply pointing out the obvious. It's not just you, you self-absorbed asshole. The not-so-subtle point is whenever you think it's just you, that you're alone in your struggles, that no one has endured or will endure something as bad as you, then you've lost perspective. Take comfort in knowing you're not the first, you're not alone, and you won't be the last to face one of life's challenges. You can and will make it through this. Welcome to the club. And then this chapter goes on and lists tons and tons of different ailments, tons of different challenges, heart disease, teen pregnancy, cerebral palsy, and it talks about the numbers of people that have the thousands, the millions. And it's just to let you know, whatever you're facing, people have faced it before you, they're facing it along with you, and they'll face it after you. And so, it's not just you self-absorbed asshole. And there's number 7. This is my best one. This one I got to read to you. This right here, you can leave after this if you want, even though we only have 2 more. But this, I think, is a little, you don't hear this one all the time. You may not want to hear it when you're facing something difficult, but it's something you need to hear. It begins like this. There's 2 sides of the coin of facing a difficult situation. The name of this tip is embrace the opportunity of your challenge. The first part of it is this. Your family and friends love you, but you will weaken that love, and they will avoid you over time if you are depressing and self-absorbed. I'll say that again, and in the chapter I say, I think you should read that again to let it sink in. Your family and friends love you, but you will weaken that love, and they will avoid you over time if you are depressing and self-absorbed. Some of you in the room may be experiencing something difficult right now. Maybe you don't want to hear that. Maybe you want to live into it. Maybe you want to talk about it. I encourage you to do all those things. But I'm here to tell you that people don't want to be around someone who is constantly talking about themselves, constantly feeling sorry for themselves, constantly being a Debbie Downer. They just don't. People will avoid you over time. But there's a flip side to that. Your family and friends love you, and you will strengthen that love, and they will gravitate more towards you over time if you are courageous and handle your challenge with grace. Say it again. Your family and friends love you, and you will strengthen that love, and they will gravitate more towards you if you are courageous and handle your challenge with grace. Just realize your challenge is going to be there either way. You know, this is your time to demonstrate your character. But if you do handle it with courage and with grace, those people around you will sit there and say, my friend's amazing. You should see the way they handle it. I'm so proud of them. And when you're going through it and you're fighting through it yourself, you can also think of it as that I'm being a role model. I'm giving them something to look for when they go through a difficult time. Hopefully my difficult time will be behind me soon. But I will give them something to inspire them. Often people can't do things for themselves that they can do for people they love. So when you're facing that difficult time, think about doing it for them, maybe when you can't even do it for yourself. 2 more. And then you're just, I gotta buy this book, it's amazing. The last one, I wish, eventually I'll have this down to a science a little bit more and have, pictures and everything, the pictures of the book. This one you can YouTube yourself. And I kind of give enough detail that I think you can find it. It's basically I volunteered in Central America between leaving New York and coming back here to teach. I volunteered in Guatemala and Costa Rica for about 6 months. And one of the places I worked was an orphanage for children with disabilities. It was one of my times to finally do something for people with disabilities. But there was a young man who was in a wheelchair and had muscular dystrophy or muscular sclerosis. And but I'm in this orphanage where no one speaks English and where they don't have internet and they don't really have anything. And I kept hearing this audio playing over and over. And it was an American voice, and so it was kind of catching my ear. And eventually I'm going through this maze of rooms, and I see this kid who's strapped to his wheelchair. Why? Because he doesn't even have the proper meds to keep his tremors down. And he's literally tied down his wheelchair, and he's watching this like 2.5-minute loop of this video of this guy. And I'm looking at this video, and it's like an old 80s computer that somebody put on the hard drive, this video clip. But it's somebody that has no arms and no legs. And this guy's name is Nick Vujicic. And I put it in the book. But he's a guy who was born with no arms and no legs. And he does inspirational talking. And this guy who had nothing was watching this and being inspired by it. And he just loved it. And he loved watching it over and over again. And it's one of those things that reminded me, you never know who you're going to inspire. You never know when you're facing that difficult challenge, who's looking to you for inspiration. And what I do in this chapter is give you permission to look at other people who are facing difficult challenges. You see that person who, you see me maybe, and you're like, I don't want to look, I don't want him to catch me staring. It happens to me all the time. You go out, just even probably about a month ago, I'm in downtown or uptown Minneapolis, and a buddy of mine and I go to this restaurant, and we get in there, and I'm like looking to see if there's any tables. I say to the person in the front, "Do you have any tables?" And then my buddy kind of has this, after hanging out with me for 20-something years, he'll always say the same thing. He'll sit there and he'll kind of go, "Oh, just way too loud." I go, "Yeah, he's in a fucking wheelchair," because I don't even notice it, but people will stare. People stare at me. And all of a sudden I look around, it's just about every, face in there. It's kind of, what's up with this guy? What's wrong with him? But, there's a lot of people that inspire me that I look to and I realize they have it worse than me. And so this chapter is, it's okay to look. It's okay to recognize that people have challenges that you don't. And you can get inspiration from that. And then the last one is never quit, which you can kind of, figure out. But, I do detail in the book that shortly after I was injured, I hit that point where I contemplated suicide. And I was at a rehab facility in Atlanta, Georgia. And it came down to whether I wanted to do it, how I was going to do it. I spent about a month and a half thinking about it, thinking about ways I could do it, obvious ways, and even ways I could do it to where everybody would think it was an accident. But ultimately, I say in the book, you can't ask that question in isolation, whether you're going to live or die. You have to think about, if I'm going to live, what am I going to do with my life? And that's where I kind of came up with 3 questions to kind of ask myself then, and one of the things I'd ask you to ask yourselves now. And it's, who do I want to be? How do I want my family and friends to see me? And what kind of difference do I want to make in my life? I asked myself those questions when I was 19 years old, when I was sitting in a park in Atlanta, thinking about killing myself. And those 3 questions helped me to go back to St. Ben's and St. John's, helped me to graduate, helped me to start new jobs, to quit new jobs because I didn't like where it was going, and then ultimately to bring me back here. I was 19 years old, and my mom often says that I became the man at 19 or 20 that she hoped I'd be at 40 or 50. And I'm just, it's one of those things that who you are is already in play. The kind of person you are, how other people see you. Some of you have heard me say this a few times, but it's how I'll kind of end with this. Is that if I was to call on any of you right now and ask you to describe yourself in 3 words, 3 attributes, what would you say? How would you describe yourself? But if I was to ask your family and friends, how would they describe you? What would they say? Are they the same? And to the extent they're not, I would challenge you that you're wrong about who you are. You may want to be somebody, but you're not acting that way. You're not living that life. You can be whoever you want to be, but you have to live that life, and it takes time. If you want to be a person of integrity, you have to live a lifetime, or you have to spend a lot of time. You want to be a person of faith, people to notice that, to be a good friend, you have to act that way. And a lot of this stuff is habit forming. You want to be a hard worker? As a college professor, I love it. Some of you even heard me say, you come in my office and you're saying, I just need to get through this class. But, when I get out, I'm going to be successful. And I tell those students all the time, no, you're probably not. Maybe, but what's going to change in you? If you're not a hard worker now, what do you think is going to make you a hard worker when you get out of here? If you're not intellectually curious now, if you're not really getting into your... What makes you think you're going to start a job and then really want to learn? This is who you are. If you want to change and be somebody different, now's the time to do it. But it's about realizing you're old enough for it to happen. And the more you challenge yourself, the more you can wake up at 30, 40 years old and be proud of where you are. That's my pitch. Questions? See our time. I don't see any questions. Paul's there. Yes, Paul.
Your book starts out with you on the floor in a bathroom in Mongolia, and then there's some, I don't want to give the book away either, but...
it's for sale.
Is it for sale? And then, you're in some sort of a canoe in Africa. What's your favorite place that you've traveled, and what are future places that you want to go?
Well, the favorite places I actually list. I list my top 5, and for various reasons. But Number one on that list actually is Vietnam. It offers almost everything. It's got a big city in Ho Chi Minh City. It's got the jungles of the Mekong Delta. It's got amazing people that are extremely nice. It's got the history of the war. It's got the beaches. So it was an amazing experience. It's a great country. Turkmenistan, none of you will ever go there. The ruler that was there at the time is now dead. But when I went there, it was like his statue was on every corner. His picture was on every wall. They didn't have any Western press. They'd get jailed if they lip sang. He changed the names of like February and March to his name and his mom's name. It was the most bizarre. I was there for like a week and a half, and I had culture shock leaving that country. I can't imagine how bizarre it is. We'll delete the tape as far as what I want to do next. I'm not tenured, and if I get tenured, then you get a sabbatical. And so I am already toying. You guys will be witness to it. We'll see what I can pull off. But I am already starting to toy with my sabbatical. Will be traveling around, going to different Benedictine monasteries throughout. Hopefully go from Collegeville all the way to the tip of South America, then go into Africa, try not to get Ebola, and then go to India and travel for maybe a year if I can swing it, and go right about the rule of Benedict, go to Benedictine monasteries, and try not to get my head cut off by ISIS. So I don't want to keep you guys, I'm keeping you an hour, and we're basically an hour. So if you do, I've served, I'm happy that I got to share this. And if you want to read the book, it's for cash here, but you can get it in the bookstore, or it's on ebooks, it's on, Barnes & Noble, it's on Amazon, and, but if you believe in it, somebody that's struggling, somebody that can use it, pass it on. It does talk about St. Ben's and St. John's in our community. Spread the word with that. And then, thank you, Marketing Club, ViewN, Enactus, The Record, everybody that is helping with this. It's much appreciated. Have a good night.